In this lesson, you're going to learn about the metric measurement system. In the United States, we use measurements like miles, inches, and feet. But in other countries, you'll hear a different type of measurement, and the first type of measurement is called meters. Meters measures distance, or you can also think about this as measuring a length. That's why when you hear people running a race, you hear it called a 5K, 5 kilometers, or kilometers, because meters measures distance. The next type of measurement is liters. Liters, you typically think of Coke. Coke is sold in a liter. So liter is what we use to measure liquids, or you can also refer to it as capacity, how much something holds. And the last unit you've probably heard, grams. Grams measures weight. There are two little tricks we're going to use as we learn how to convert metric units. So BLT, like the sandwich, BLT means when I have a big unit and I'm changing it to a smaller unit. For instance, if I had miles and I wanted to change it into inches, I would use multiplication. And BLT stands for big to little. You're going to times it. You're going to be multiplying. Because if I have 1 mile, that means I'm going to have a lot of inches inside of that mile. The second note we're going to use is LBD, and it means the opposite. If I have a little unit and it's changing into a big unit, I'm going to divide it. So if I have 1 inch and I want to see how much of a mile that is, well, it's not going to be a very big distance because I need a lot of inches to make a mile. So BLT means big to little, you're going to multiply, times it. Little to big, you're going to be using division. The phrase we're going to use to help us learn the metric system is King Hector died by drinking chocolate milk. Each of these first letters relate to a metric unit. So I'm going to show you how to draw our metric chart. I'm going to start with King. King really stands for kilo. So you'll hear a kilometer, kiloliter, or kilogram. Kilometer would be measuring distance, kiloliter would be measuring the liquid, and kilogram would be weight. My next is hector, and it actually stands for hecto. So it could be a hectometer, hectoliter, hectogram. And notice that these letters on this side are capitalized. So this capital D stands for deca. And it's important that I know these are capital because these are my bigger units. A kilometer is a big distance. So these are my larger units. Bi actually stands for the base. So meters, liters, and grams is going to be the base to every word. So you can put meters, liters, and grams here, or you can just write MLG. Now that I'm on the other side of my base unit, these letters are lowercase, and because these are my smaller units. So lowercase d stands for deci, kind of similar to decimal. So I could refer to decimeters, deciliters, or decigrams. Little c is something you've probably heard a lot. It refers to centi. So centimeter, centiliter, or centigram. And also another common one you've probably heard is milli. So millimeters, milliliters, or milligrams. Now this time I wrote out all of the words, kilo, hecto, and deca, but as we use this chart in class, you can just write the first letter, so K, King, Hector, dyed by, so my base units, which I'm going to put M for meters, liters, grams. King Hector died by drinking chocolate milk. So this is how we're going to draw our King Hector chart. Now this base in the center, you can put a box around it or even make it look like a 1. So if you see, for example, 5 with an M, if there's only one letter, it's referring to this center box. So 5 meters, 5 liters, or 5 grams will always mean you move to the center. The outer letters, K, H, uppercase D, and lowercase d, C, and M, they are all going to be a prefix to meters, liters, and grams. So, for example, this lowercase m stands for milli, and when we're using it, you'll either see it as millimeters with 2 m's, milliliters, or milligrams. So, to know when you're moving to this M or when to move to the middle M, if there are 2 letters, it's referring to meter, milliliter, or milligram. If there's only one M, then it is referring to meters. Now we're going to look and see how these different units relate to one another. So I'm going to start by drawing my King Hector died by drinking chocolate milk chart. And I've gone ahead and labeled that the capital letters mean that those are big units, and my lowercase letters mean that these are smaller units. So I'm going to start with my first example. It says if I have 1 meter, they want to know how many millimeters that equals. So since there is only one M, I know that puts me in my base. So I'm going to start at meters, and I'm going to millimeters, and there's 2 letters, and it starts with M, milli. So I'm going to move from the center M to this M. So I'm going to put my pencil in this middle base box, and I'm going to ask myself, am I moving to the left or to the right? And I'm moving to the right, and now I'm going to count how many spaces. So 1, 2, 3, and I put an arrow because this helps me know that I was moving to little units. So this means I started with a big unit, meters, and moved to a little unit, millimeters. So this is BLT. And every time I move a unit, I'm moving by a power of 10. So since this is BLT, T stands for times or multiplication. So this first move I multiplied by 10, then I multiplied by 10 again, and then I multiplied by 10 a third time. So 10 times 10 is 100, and 100 times 10 again is 1,000. So in order to figure out how many millimeters, I would do 1 meter times 1,000. And a easier way to do this is if I write 1 meter and I put the decimal. In my chart, I moved 3 places to the right. So I'm going to take my decimal and do the same thing. 1, 2, 3. I mark my new decimal and mark out the old one and put zeros in that place. And that answer equals 1,000 millimeters. And I'm going to erase my scratch work so I have room to do more. And we're going to start with our next example. So our next example also starts at meters, which puts me in the middle box. And this time they want me to move to centimeters. So I'm looking at the first letter here, C. So I'm moving from the middle base box to C for centi. So I'm going to start in the middle, and I move to the left. I move once, that's times 10. Twice is 100. So once again, I was going from a big unit and moving to smaller units. So this is still BLT. I am multiplying. And since I moved twice, that's 10 times 10. This is times 100. So 1 meter times 100. And once again, I can just write my number 1 with the decimal, and I can copy what I did up here. I moved to the right 2 places, so I'm going to move right 2 places, mark out the old decimal. So when I have 1 meter, I have 100 centimeters. Next, my example wants me to go to lowercase d, and that stands for decimeters. So I'm going to erase my chart again. And I'm starting at the meters again in the base area. And this time I'm moving to the right, but I'm only going to move once. And so I'm still going from big to little. This is still BLT. But since I moved one time, it was just times 10. So 1 meter times 10. Or I can write my 1 with a decimal, and if I move it one place and mark out the old one, 1 meter equals 10 decimeters. So if I look back, it takes 1,000 millimeters to make a meter stick. It takes 100 centimeters to make a meter, and it takes 10 decimeters to make a meter. Our next example wants me to move to decameters, and I put a capital D so that I'd know if I was talking about deca or deci. I'm still starting in the base box with 1 meter. So I'm going to start with 1 meter right here. And I'm going to ask myself if I'm going to move left or move right. And in this case, deca is to the right. So this time I actually started moving towards the bigger units, which means I was at a small unit, a little unit, and I was getting bigger. So this is going to be LBD. And since I only moved once, I was dividing by 10. So this is 1 divided by 10. And I can solve this by writing 1, and the decimal is right behind it. And I'm going to copy what my chart did. My chart moved to the left 1 place. So I'm going to take my decimal and move it left 1 place. Mark out the old one. So now the decimal is right in front of 1. And I can put a 0 in the whole number's place. So when I have 1 meter, that is 1/10 of a decameter. So in order for me to have a decameter, I would need 10 meter sticks. Our next example says, starting at 1 meter, I'm going to go to hectometers. So I'm looking really just at this first letter H. So I know that on my chart, I'm once again going to start in the base box with meters. And I'm going to ask, am I moving left or right? Well, hecto is to the left, so I'm going to move 1 2 times. So I'm going from a smaller unit and moving to a bigger unit. So little to big is LBD. So this is division. So 1 meter divided by, if I move 2 times, that's 10 times 10, so I'm dividing by 100. And my cheat way of doing this is write 1 with the decimal and copy what your chart did. It moved your decimal to the left 2 times. And mark out the old one. And this time, because the decimal, there's a scoop in front of it, the 1, I'm going to put a 0 in its place. So 1 meter is 0 and 1/100th of a hectometer. So that means in order for me to have a hectometer, I need 100 meter sticks. Our last example is 1 meter moving to a kilometer. So I'm looking at the K. So my last example says start in the base box. And once again, I'm going to move to the left. I'm going to move 1 2 3 places. And I was going from a little unit and moving to a bigger unit. So this is little to big. And since I moved 3 times, that's 10, 100, 1,000. So this is 1 divided by 1,000. And that means I take my decimal in 1 and I do what the chart did, move it 3 places to the left, mark out the old one, and there are now 2 zeros in front of the 1. So when I have 1 meter, that is the same as having 1,000th of a kilometer. So in order for me to have the distance of a kilometer, I need 1,000 meter sticks. Now let's try a few more examples. This first problem says 4 kilometers equals how many meters? And I know it's meters because there's only one M, which means I'm going to be in this one little box with my bases. So I'm going to look at the beginning number. It says 4 kilometers, and there's a K, which means in my chart I'm going to be starting at K. And I'm going to ask, am I moving to the left or to the right? And I know my big units are over here, and my little units are over here. So to get to meters, I'm going to move to the right. So 1, 2, 3 times. And since I was going from a big unit to a little unit, this is BLT. And I moved 3 times, so I know I was multiplying by 10, 100, 1,000. And in order to do this, I can multiply by 1,000, or I can write 4. And I know the decimal in 4 is right behind it. And I'm going to copy what the chart did. I'm going to move right 1, 2, 3 places, mark out the old one, and put zeros in their place. So when I have 4 kilometers, that is the same as having 4,000 meters. And I can check myself by looking to see 4 turned into 4,000, and it got bigger, and that's because I was multiplying. The next example is 24 7/10 kilometers equals how many meters? The difference between this problem and the first example is that this example already has a decimal in it. So when I start to move the decimal, I'm going to start with this decimal rather than add a decimal at the end. So once again, I'm going to look up at my chart. I started at kilometers, and I moved to a smaller unit 1, 2, 3 times. So this is still big to little times it. I'm going to multiply by 1,000 again. So this time I'm going to write 24 7/10, and I'm going to start where the decimal is, and I'm going to move 3 places to the right. So 1, 2, 3. Here's my new decimal. Get rid of the old one. So if I have 24 7/10 kilometers, I really have 24,700 meters. Now let's look at our third example. Our third example, it says 2 5/10 centimeters. So I'm looking at the C, centimeters, means I'm going to start at C. And this time I'm moving to millimeters, mm, and since there are 2 m's, I know that I'm actually going to be moving to the outside m, milli. And I'm actually not going to be moving to my base units at all this time, which is okay. So starting with my example, it says start at centimeters, so I start my pencil at centimeters. And to get to milli, I have to go to the right 1 place, and I'm going to put my arrow. And I was at a big unit, and I moved to a little unit. So this is still BLT. BLT, big to little times it. I'm multiplying. And I only moved once, so I really am multiplying by 10. Once again, 2 5/10 had a decimal in it, so I'm going to write 2 5/10. And I'm going to copy what the chart did. The chart moved to the right once, so I'm going to take my decimal and move it to the right. And when I mark out the new one, old one, this new number looks like 25. So if I have 2.5 centimeters, 2.5 centimeters, that is the same as having 25 millimeters. And my answer got bigger because I was multiplying. The fourth example is once again going from centimeters to millimeters. So starting on my chart at C, I moved to the right 1 place. So because I'm going from big to little, this is BLT. I am multiplying. I moved once, so that is times 10. And now I'm going to write my number 50 300. Since the decimal is already there, I'm going to start where the decimal is. And my chart moved once to the right, so I'm going to move once to the right and mark out the new one, old one. And so now this whole number looks like 503/10. So if I have 50 300 centimeters, that is the same as having 503/10 millimeters. Let's try 2 more examples. My first example says if I have 356 hectograms, I want to know how many kilograms that is. So even though I'm working with grams here, that's just the base end of the unit, I'm still going to look at my first letter, H, hecto. So on my chart, I'm going to start with the H's, and they want me to go to kilograms. And so I'm going to ask myself if I'm moving to the left or to the right. I'm going to move left 1 place. And I know that is a little unit getting bigger. So little to big, LBD. This is division. And since I only moved once, this is like dividing by 10. So I'm going to write 356. And I know if this were money, the decimal would be right there at the end. And I'm going to do exactly what my chart did. My chart moved to the left once, so I'm going to take the decimal and move it to the left, mark out the old one. So this new number looks like 35 and 6/10. So when I have 356 hectograms, I have 35 and 6/10 kilograms. All right, another example is 16 and 1/10 milligrams. So milli means I'm going to be starting at the outside M right here, and it has 2 letters, so that's my sign. So milligrams, and they want me to move to grams, and since there's only 1 letter, I know that they're talking about this center column where my grams are. So I'm starting at the little m, milli. I'm going to put my pencil here, and now I'm going to move to the left to get a gram, so 1, 2, 3 places. So I started from a little unit and got bigger, so LBD, this is division, and I moved 1, 2, 3 times, so this is dividing by 1,000. So I'm going to write 16 and 1/10, and I don't need to add a decimal because they've already given me a decimal to start with. So I'm going to move to the left 3 places, so 1, 2, 3. Mark out my old decimal. I need to put a 0 in this place. And so now I'm going to write my new answer. 0 and 0, 1, 6, 1. And I would say that is 0 and 161 10,000ths grams. And looking at both of these answers, I was using division. And so both of my numbers should have gotten smaller, and they did, which means I must have solved them correctly. Now try these practice problems. Remember, if you're moving from a big unit to a little unit, you're going to times it and use multiplication. If you're moving from a little unit to a big unit, you're going to use division. Write down what power of 10 you used in each problem. If you move the decimal 1 time, it's 10. If you move the decimal 2 times, 10 times 10 would be 100. And if you move the decimal 3 times, 10 times 10 times 10 would equal 1,000. Remember to write down the units at the end of each of your answers.